25% of your problems stem from a single mistake. It's not laziness, it's not a lack of talent. It's something you do every night without realizing you're sabotaging yourself. Machiavelli saw this 500 years ago. There's a truth Machiavelli would have stated without hesitation, but which almost no young person realizes in time. Most human downfalls begin with small acts of carelessness that seem too innocent to attract attention. He observed that people are not destroyed by great enemies, but by discreet habits that accumulate in the silence of the nights. Therefore, he would assert that controlling bedtime is one of the most powerful ways to preserve one's own destiny. For Machiavelli, the early morning hours are the territory where reason weakens and recklessness reigns. And have you ever noticed how bad decisions almost never arise at 2 in the afternoon, but appear forcefully at 2 in the morning? What changes within us during this dark interval? Perhaps it is precisely the temporary loss of judgment that opens doors to errors that seem small, but which shape profound consequences. And it is at this point that Machiavelli would give his first warning: whoever does not master their nights loses control of their own life. Machiavelli argued that man is lost not by great tragedies, but by the moments when he abandons his own inner governance. And nothing symbolizes this better than those silent hours after midnight, when the city seems to sleep, but the mind begins to fail. How many times has someone gone out just for an hour and returned carrying a decision they regretted for months? How many conversations that should have ended early dragged on until they became impulsive arguments, thoughtless messages, inopportune confessions, or promises that no one remembers with pride? Machiavelli would say that these episodes are not accidents. They are signs that fatigue has taken the throne and reason has been deposed. He observed that when a man stays awake longer than his body can bear, something inside him shifts. A seemingly trustworthy friend becomes dangerous. A common environment transforms into slippery ground. A banal idea gains the force of a risky decision. It is as if, during this period, the world changes texture and choices cease to be choices, becoming instinctive reactions that later prove too costly. The young man who believes he is simply enjoying the night doesn't realize that at that very moment, he is opening himself up to mistakes that he will only find in the morning. And according to Machiavelli, it is precisely on this border between lucidity and fatigue that a man's destiny can be silently rewritten without him noticing until it is too late to turn back. Machiavelli believed that much of human power stems from the ability to act before problems arise. He said that men protect themselves not by reacting to consequences, but by discreetly shaping the causes. Therefore, he saw in the simple habit of going to bed early a kind of silent tool for self-preservation, a strategic shield that prevents mistakes before they even occur. For him, modest habits carry political power, insofar as they structure character and reduce the number of foolish decisions a person will have to face. Looking at everyday life, Machiavelli would see something many ignore. Most personal disasters could have been avoided if the individual had simply ended the day earlier. A toxic romance begun out of late-night boredom, an impulsive expense made when the mind was already failing, a conversation that dragged on until it turned into conflict. Each of these episodes would seem, to him, the direct result of a lack of self-control. And then the question arises, how many mistakes that you call bad luck are merely consequences of your own emotional insomnia? He would also understand that sleep is not just rest, but a psychological boundary. When you sleep at the right time, you restore judgment, which for Machiavelli was always the true measure of intelligence. A well-rested mind sees what is really there. An exhausted mind sees only what it fears or desires. And what if the world were divided not between the strong and the weak, but between the lucid and the tired? This idea changes everything. Suddenly, going to bed early ceases to be a habit and becomes a competitive advantage. There's another often overlooked point. By choosing to go to bed early, you're rejecting invisible invitations to chaos. You're saying no to environments that encourage mistakes. No to people who only appear when you're vulnerable. No to ideas that seem brilliant at night and ridiculous in the morning. Machiavelli would call this a containment strategy, the ability to prevent reality from becoming more complex than you can handle. And have you noticed how much lighter life feels when you don't have to deal with problems you created yourself? For him, changing a habit is declaring war on 20 simultaneous weaknesses. Avoiding the early morning hours not only eliminates tiredness, it reduces emotional risks, financial impulses, unnecessary conflicts, and repeated regrets. It's almost like making a silent deal with yourself, trading the superficial pleasure of late-night wakefulness for a mental clarity that strengthens character. But what would happen if you treated your sleep not as a detail, but as a daily strategic decision? This would be the revelation Machiavelli would leave in the air. When you master bedtime, you also master the hours when your worst enemy, your own impulsiveness, usually gains ground, and controlling that can be worth more than any talent you think you have. Machiavelli said that man loses more through exhaustion than through lack of talent, and some stories confirm this in an almost absurd way. There are records of military commanders who made fatal decisions after sleepless nights, while less brilliant but rested rivals achieved unexpected victories simply by keeping their minds sharp. In Florence, ancient accounts mention young nobles who ruined entire alliances because they stayed awake longer than necessary, letting emotion rule where prudence should have reigned. Machiavelli observed these episodes with almost surgical precision and concluded that discipline is not an ideal, but a defense against oneself. He knew that fatigue distorts perceptions, transforms small risks into invisible dangers, and opens up space for choices that seemed impossible a few hours before. And perhaps the unsettling question he would ask today would be simple. How many defeats do you attribute to fate when, in fact, they were just decisions made with a tired mind? Machiavelli said that the most common mistake man makes is asking the wrong question, and this is repeated when someone wants to wake up early without understanding the root of the problem. He would argue that merit lies not in the effort of the morning, but in the silent decision of the night. There are accounts of diplomats who ruined negotiations because they arrived exhausted, believing that willpower alone was enough to compensate for sleepless nights. However, a tired mind does not obey. It betrays, distorts, exaggerates. It is at this point that tension arises, when you insist on controlling the day, but surrender the early morning hours to chaos. Machiavelli would see this as a dangerous contradiction, capable of bringing down even the most disciplined. And this is where the turning point happens. You don't lose the battle when you wake up late, but when you decide to sleep late believing that nothing will change. It is this illusion that transforms promising men into confused figures, always one step behind their own goals. Machiavelli believed that a man's greatest power lies in his ability to prevent his own impulses from leading him to unnecessary defeats. He said that governing oneself is more difficult than governing any city, because the internal struggle is silent, constant, and fought far from the eyes of the world. This is why he saw going to bed at the right time as a discreet but decisive way to change the course of one's life. It's not a moral issue, nor a spiritual ritual. It's a practical strategy for preserving lucidity and strength. When you choose to end the day before losing control of your mind, you are avoiding useless arguments, impulsive spending, draining relationships, and decisions that seem small but erode your energy and your ability to move forward. Machiavelli knew that the future is not written by those who run the fastest, but by those who make the fewest mistakes. And going to bed early is one of the simplest ways to reduce errors without additional effort. The practical application begins with the details. Setting a fixed bedtime, turning off screens before exhaustion takes over, organizing the environment so that the body understands it's time to stop. These small gestures create a discipline that doesn't require force, only consistency. And as you repeat this choice, your mind begins to align with your goals naturally. Tasks seem less burdensome, decisions become clearer, emotions cease to control your day. Life improves not because you've become a different person, but because you've stopped being a prisoner of your own fatigue. Machiavelli would say that this is the kind of power that no one sees, but everyone feels, the invisible ruler of oneself. And perhaps the question he would leave echoing is simple and direct. If such a small change can eliminate so many problems, why continue living at the mercy of chance? Respecting sleep is respecting the future. Sleeping early prevents the early morning hours from rewriting your story without your permission. It's up to you to decide whether you want to live reacting to chaos or building a more lucid, stable, and intelligent path. If this video resonated with you, like it, leave a comment, even anonymously, and subscribe to the channel to continue this Journey of transformation and self-mastery.